Hey, good morning, y'all. Josh of Severe Weather. Happy Friday to you. And lots to talk about here in the next couple of weeks with some more extreme weather expected. I will say yesterday's severe weather did not pan out as pretty much everything showed it would. I guess I have two ways that I see this. One, I'm very much thankful that we're not talking about widespread destruction. God came through here and said, we're going to spare the poor people of Mississippi and Alabama and Tennessee. And while there was some severe weather, things definitely were not as bad as we expected them to be. And not just me, but pretty much every meteorologist expected this to be a pretty decent outbreak. And fortunately, it wasn't. Second, that is humiliating to have your butt kicked on a forecast like that. But, if I want to err on the side of wrong, I'd rather people be a little bit more prepared than and then be kind of, I don't know, pleasantly surprised. I mean, it was still pretty bad. There were lots of storms yesterday, lots of rain fell, some flooding, Kentucky, Tennessee, northern Alabama, and a few tornadoes. But things certainly weren't as bad as they could have been, and I'm thankful for that. So everybody keeps talking to me about what the rest of the winter and early spring looks like, and we've got some major extremes in the forecast coming up as we get into March. You can see that models are hinting at two storms from coast to coast as we end the month of February and March roars in like a lion. California is going to see some interesting weather, to say the least. But also the East Coast, some of you in the Northeast that really haven't seen any snow could be in for something. I'd love to say this is a guarantee and it's a lock, but it's several days out still and things could change. Here are the storm reports from yesterday, and certainly fewer than I expected, about 30 total reports. There were a few tornadoes in Mississippi, maybe even one in Tennessee, but I expected the map to have 3 to 4 times as many reports, and I'm thankful it didn't. And once again, humbling to say the least, but I'm okay with it. We are definitely going to see more severe weather as we head through the end of the month into next month. Here is a look at the GFS, and you guys can see this strong front moving through the east. Things are going to cool off quickly with rain in the Carolinas and southeast coast. Definitely not a widespread severe weather event, but there will be strong winds and then quickly falling temperatures this afternoon. In the Northeast, we are going to see some snow falling across western New York and up into northern Maine, a little bit of sleet and freezing rain in central Maine and New Hampshire. And on the backside, we are going to see some snow showers today developing across eastern Kentucky and into West Virginia, eastern Tennessee, southwest Virginia, and parts of far western North Carolina. Not a lot of accumulation, but definitely a switch over from yesterday's warmth to today's cold, wind, and some snow at the higher elevations. The weekend looks a lot quieter. It'll be chilly to start. High pressure and control in the southeast, cooling off in Florida as well. As we get later into the weekend, it does start to turn milder again, and next week warms right back up. I was joking with some friends saying, the warm weather has been working 5 days a week and taking the weekends off here in the East. It's been chilly in the weekend, warm during the week, which I know has kind of pissed a lot of folks off, but that's just how the weather pattern's been. We're in a cycle right now. Next week, we do have a storm moving across the eastern U.S. There will be some rain and heavier thunderstorms in the midsection. Severe chances right now look pretty low for Monday and Tuesday, but definitely going to be a little bit wet here in the mid-south as we start next week, and maybe a little snow into New England by Tuesday night and Wednesday. The west is where most of the weather starts off next week. We have a much colder air mass dropping down from Canada. It's going to be quite cold here in the Rockies and northern plains for much of next week. Snow dropping all the way down, and we've got quite a bit of a cold storm coming down the west coast Thursday into Friday, and that could produce some snowfall at much lower elevations of what are typically seeing snow. Coastal Oregon, northwestern California, and then, of course, the mountains as well. At the same time, we see a storm moving out onto the plains from the Rockies. This is going to have some very drastic temperature drops with it. We'll see major temperature drops across this part of the country here Thursday into Friday, and snow from Montana to maybe Maine. Believe it or not, here on Thursday of next week. A lot of snow. Could be a major snowstorm for Minnesota and Wisconsin and Michigan and northern New England, but the warm air winds out here. You see the red lines expanding northeastward, and it will be very warm on Thursday across the eastern U.S., the deep south, southeast, mid-Atlantic region, and then much colder in New England. So a very strong gradient of temperature from New England to the mid-Atlantic region here on Thursday. It will cool off Friday across the rest of the Northeast. We have a strong front moving through, but it doesn't look like anything but some lighter rain as we look at primarily a weak front moving through precipitation-wise, but strong temperature-wise And then very strong high pressure drops down into the central part of the country, meaning it'll be a cold weekend for much of the central and eastern U.S., while the west stays cold and unsettled. California could see some interesting weather here with snow in places that aren't used to it as we get towards the end of next week into next weekend. And then that storm eventually does come out of the southwest at the beginning of the following week, around the 27th and 28th of February. And this time we've got cold air unloading into New England. We could see the storm track shifting south. It's still going to be warm in the southern U.S., mid-Atlantic states, but in the Northeast, we could see a shift over to potentially a significant storm on the East Coast for March 1st. Again, this is still off in the distance, so definitely not a lock by any chance. But the GFS over the last few runs is showing a storm in the Northeast, including snow for areas that have not seen much. So that'll be a brief cool down before it warms back up. But March certainly looks like it's going to storm in here just like a lion. You can see the upper air chart from pivotalweather.com. Our strong trough moves through the east here, and then the ridge rebuilds next week. But we can see colder air aloft working its way down into the west and the northern part of the country. This is courtesy of the stratosphere warming up quickly and bringing some polar vortex-like air down south and west. I say like, it's not going to be the actual vortex. But nonetheless, you see a lot of the country is colder than average here next week, except the east, which is warmer than average. A very strong battleground here on Thursday into Friday. And where the front ends up is going to mean quite a bit of a gradient here from the upper Midwest to the lower Ohio Valley. We could be looking at 70s here and 20s up in here for temperatures Fahrenheit. We have quite a storm in the west that is going to stay locked in there, and cold air is going to come up and over the ridge in the form of multiple storms moving into New England and the Northeast as we get to the end of next week. But really, the colder air waits until the following week, and you can see it spills up and over the ridge here into the Northeast. And this GFS run shows a pretty significant storm on the East Coast coming out of the Northwest and deepening as it moves towards the coast. Again, that's not the guarantee at this point, but it's something I'll be watching for you. Temperature anomalies. Oh man, sorry, I'm learning this website here. You can see very warm aloft here next week, especially Wednesday and Thursday in the east. By the way, with this kind of a trough, there could be some severe weather again in parts of the mid and deep south by Wednesday and Thursday. Again, a lot of uncertainty, so I'm not locking in on that just yet. But very warm out ahead of this system here before things cool off quite a bit over the weekend once again. Next week warms up, or the following week warms up, and then temperatures drop off pretty quickly here by the end of February, beginning of March timeframe. And here's a look at these surface high temperatures from the GFS. You can see our warmth gets wiped out tomorrow, and it's a much cooler day in the east. Colder air lurks and starts moving into the Dakotas here next Tuesday and Wednesday. But look how warm it gets here across the southeast on Thursday. Let me step that forward one for you here. One more. There. Thursday's highs, we are looking at maybe 40s in New England, but 70 around Philadelphia, 82 in Raleigh, and Northeast Florida is going to feel like summer with highs of 90 to 93 degrees at the end of February. If that doesn't make you want to puke, I don't know what does. South Texas, upper 90s in some places. So pollen counts are going to continue to shoot through the roof here next week. In the middle of the country, we do have clearly a storm system that'll bring potential heavy rain and severe weather. But you see the front here moving into Oklahoma, where highs are in the 70s in most of Oklahoma. Then you get into western Kansas, and they drop off into the 20s. Teens in Nebraska, single digits here across Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota for highs. And as we get beyond the following day, that cold air makes its way into the east. So in New York City, we're going to be 50s and 60s, dropping off by the weekend into the 30s for highs, maybe even 20s. We'll see about that. Before warming back up, bouncing back up for a couple of days. And again, it's hot in the south by the beginning of the week of the 27th, but much chillier air works back into the Northeast here. And we will cool off as well in the mid-Atlantic states for the second half of the following week with highs in the 40s and low 50s, according to the GFS. And here's your nighttime lows. And you can see that cold in the upper Midwest this weekend expanding into New England. Then it warms up next week. And then another wave of cold, 20s, 30s, 40 below zero in central Canada. That cold air invades from the north and west. And we have nighttime lows Wednesday night in Wyoming, 20 to 30 below zero. California, 30s and 40s near the coast, 20s, teens inland. Next weekend, brutal cold expected on the GFS here, with the weekend starting off at 30 to 40 below zero in the Dakotas. And that cold air makes it all the way down into Texas, the I-40 corridor here. New England will be quite cold. And then the following week, it warms up briefly before the next wave of cold drops down. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on temperatures. We'll have records today in Florida potentially. The weekend much chillier, and then warming right back up next week. 80s in Mississippi and Louisiana on Tuesday, 90s in South Texas. Boxes include record highs, so a lot of Florida into the Carolinas and Southeast see record highs Wednesday into Thursday. At the same time, you have these circles in the West. Those will be record low maximums. So a lot of the West will be below average while the East is above average. And this is about as crazy as you see here on the map. I'll zoom into the east. You can see record highs in central Florida today, even parts of interior New England, and then much cooler this weekend. We bounce right back next week with more records expected in Florida, parts of the Carolinas, Georgia, back to Louisiana. Thursday, record highs with low to mid 90s potentially in central Florida, 80s on the Gulf Coast, near 80 in Fayetteville, even some 60s and low 70s in parts of Ohio. So that'll make you puke if you like winter for sure. Sorry for the graphic image here. In the central part of the country, we're bouncing right back this weekend in Texas and Oklahoma. Very warm to start next week. Very cold, though, across the upper Midwest, and the Dakotas drop below zero. That's where this white line is. Montana, North Dakota below zero. The West will not see any warmth anytime soon. Although it does warm up a little bit here on Sunday in California and Arizona, that gets wiped out here quickly as we get to the start of next week. And much colder on Wednesday. We go from the mid 60s in San Diego to the low 50s on Wednesday. That's going to be jacket to heavy coat weather in the mornings. And then Thursday, a lot of record chill up and down the east or west coast, with highs barely above freezing in Seattle and Portland, 40s here in northern Cal, lower 50s in southern Cal. And if you get to the mountains, we're talking 20s and 30s. So definitely a big shock coming. And if you look at the storm impacting the West here, you can see where it's coming from, directly straight down from Western Canada. Lower elevation snows potentially here as we head into Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of next week, and very chilly in California. You can see snow totals piling up here in the Rockies this weekend, but next week, that snow expands south and west into the Sierra Nevada, the Cascades, and even into Northern California, and then a bigger storm spreading from Utah and Wyoming out onto the plains here later next week. So this is going to be a shock and awe here on the West Coast. And I'll zoom into the Northwest and show you all big time snow in the Cascades for sure, and the Olympic Mountains here. We do see potentially a small accumulation around Seattle Wednesday into Thursday. Portland could see a little bit of snow, but look at Bandon and Coos Bay, maybe seeing a few inches of snow here by the end of the week. That is pretty much almost never happens. I'm not gonna say it never happens, but it's pretty darn rare. And out west here on the European, we can see snow piling up around Monterey Bay, maybe an inch of snow, and up to Eureka, 6-7 inches of snow. LA, we could see snow when we get into the higher ground here just east of the city. Even San Diego. So we're going to see potentially some record-breaking snow here in parts of California and Oregon towards the second half of next week. LA, the European Ensemble, has a couple of members that drop up to 3 inches of snow at the airport. The record is 2 inches, so this would be a record-breaking snow if one or two of these ensembles ends up being right. That would be at the end of next week into next weekend. A lot of ensembles don't have it, though, so again, still up in the air on that one. San Francisco, potentially 3 or 4 inches of snow on several of these ensemble members, and that would be a record-breaking snow for you here Friday, Saturday, into Sunday. A lot of models, again, show minimal snow, but a few inches would be significant in the Bay Area. And you go up to Eureka, Northern California, and there are some ensemble members at the airport showing as much as 24 to 30 inches of snow in a place that almost always just sees rain. So this could be quite a crushing snow for Northern California here. The GFS model shows it as well. You can see that snow building down into Northern Cal here by the end of the week. And here's our storm that moves across the northern tier of the country next week. As we get on further into the following week, we warm back up. We could see a little snow in the Northeast, not really a big deal. But as we get towards the beginning of March, we see a major potential snow here across the Northeast, including the New York City area. And let me zoom in so you guys can see that. in the Northeast, this run of the GFS brings potentially 20 to 30 inches just north and west of the city, 8 to 16 on Long Island. Again, this is very far off in the future, so a lot very well could change. But if you go back and look at the model yesterday, it was even more significant. It had a massive snow across Pennsylvania, Maryland, northern Delaware, New Jersey, 2 to 3 feet of snow, and Long Island, one of our heaviest snows of all time. If this run of the GFS is right. But the run after it had it back in Virginia. The run after that has it shifting north. There's still quite a bit of uncertainty and really just way too soon to make any exact calls on this. And the way this winter has gone, I really don't want you to get your hopes up just yet. But I also think that if there is a potential to see something, it very well could be in early March based on the flip that we're seeing in the weather patterns. So thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you joining me. I hope that you have a chance to subscribe to the video. I'm obviously going to talk more about next week's extremes. We'll have a video again tomorrow. I'm going to be traveling for work Monday and Tuesday. So next week, the second half of the week will be when I do my videos, but I'll try to update you guys on the community posts. I want to give all the glory to God for giving me the opportunity to share with you, for sparing a lot of people in the South yesterday that looked like they were going to get hit really hard. Not that it wasn't a stormy day, but thank you, God, for sparing those folks. And those that did get hit, I just ask special prayer protection as we clean up. And I want to read a quick verse, Romans 8:28. And we know that God causes all things to work together for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And I've been called according to God's purpose to try to do my best with weather forecasting, to produce these videos and to help folks plan and be safe. And I thank God for giving me that opportunity through his son, Jesus Christ. I hope you have a blessed day. And if you have any prayer requests, I'm happy to pray for you. And we'll talk again tomorrow morning. God bless you all.